Welcome to Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet with Ryan Poterack from Poterack Capital Advisory. You have unique values, objectives, fears, life experiences, and biases. Any financial professional who ignores or minimizes the importance of your story may not be able to help you achieve your ideal outcomes or hit your goals. It's time to experience the PCA difference. In this podcast, we help business executives, soon-to-be retirees, and solutions-based individuals overcome the anxiety leading up to their upcoming years. We do this by initiating in-depth discussions about the financial aspects of retirement, like tax planning and asset allocation, alongside, and often overlooked, personal and lifestyle aspects. Join us for this journey where we explore retirement from a contrarian point of view, as Ryan draws from years of experience and qualified guest professionals to help you explore the true purpose of your money in retirement and the impact you want to make in your golden years. Ryan Poterack and Alec Quaid offer investment advice through Private Advisor Group, which is a federally registered investment advisor. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Private Advisor Group and Poterack Capital Advisory are separate entities. This information is not intended to be a substitute for individualized legal or tax advice. Please consult your legal or tax advisor regarding your specific situation.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet. I am your guest host today, Alec Quaid, certified financial planner and wealth manager with Poterack Capital Advisory, filling in for Ryan today. And today we're going to be talking about variable number 2 in the retirement equation. So last time I started this sort of mini series on the retirement equation, talking about longevity and planning for the time from when you retire to when you kick the bucket, when you pass away, when you die. How long is that period going to be, and how do we plan for the inherent risks that come with outliving your money? And sort of each variable in the retirement equation plays off that in some respects, but there's some other distinct variables that when we're doing retirement income planning for our clients have to be appropriately assumed and understood by the client why we're assuming what we are, because any little change in assumptions over a multi-decade period, even very small changes in assumptions, can have large impacts in the outcomes of the retirement income plan, the cash flow projection, whatever you want to call it. And so it's very important we all have an equal understanding of why we're assuming what we are assuming. Our approach in general is to be very simple, to simplify everything in the retirement income plan so that we all understand it. And the reality is the assumptions that we're making, some of them will be right and some of them will not be right. And that is why retirement income planning is a proactive process. It's not a one and done solution where you can run some projections and get your nice pretty graph and report and be on your way for the next 30 years of your life. No, it's something that you have to come back and revisit every single year. So let's talk about variable number 2, and that is asset allocation. What is the makeup of your investment portfolio, and what's the risk return profile of your investment portfolio? So what do I mean by makeup of your investment portfolio? That's like a layman's terms way of what asset allocation really means. Asset allocation means, do you have some money in stocks, some money in bonds, some money in real estate, whatever else? That is how your assets are allocated to these different asset classes, if you will. But it's really just what is the makeup of your investment portfolio? And why that's important is because what your asset allocation is determines what your rate of return over the retirement years of your life or heading into retirement is. And that's a major assumption we need to make, because we need to understand how much interest or how much growth your investments will have over that period. And so when we look at something like stocks, it'd be easy to say, okay, well, let's just take the long-term historical average of the S&P 500. Now that's the stock market, right? Well, that's 10, 11%. Well, I've never seen any retiree that wants to be 100% invested in stocks, for example. There's too much risk. And that's why I said it's the risk and return profile. That's one of the things we look at when we're planning for a client and building an investment portfolio is how much return can we get at a certain level of risk that the client is comfortable with. And that will allow the client to reach their long-term goal, which, as you may remember from last episode, for retirement planning, it's so that this equation equals greater than or equal to 0 at the end of your life, right? We cannot run out of money. That is all we're trying to do here. So our money needs to continue being invested and continue growing over time, really for two primary reasons. One, it has to keep up with the pace of inflation, because if you're not at least having your money keep up with a pace of inflation, that's actually another way to lose money, right? If your money grows at 2% and inflation runs at 3%, you're actually losing 1% per year. So our money has to grow at a rate that exceeds the pace of inflation. And number two, it has to continue to grow so that we can continue to take distributions from it and utilize the interests that we're earning and principal over time, even though a common thing we hear from clients is, I never want to touch principal, I want to spend down interest. Well, that just doesn't make sense. You spent all this time building up principal, building up your investment assets, a lot of which includes your principal contributions. Eventually, you're going to touch that and spend it down. That's the reason you were saving it and spending and accumulating it over time. But we don't want to just be drawing down principal, because if we're just drawing down principal without interest being earned over time or growth in our investments over time, we're going to run out of money, probably, over the long term. So we view at PCA sort of, it's two separate conversations in our mind. One conversation, which is not the focus of this podcast mini-series, is a deep dive into your investment allocation and how we structure your investments at a given level of risk to earn a rate of return that we feel is going to accomplish your goals long term, or not even that we feel, that we do the math that will accomplish your goals of not running out of money long term. That is sort of its own conversation. But for the assumption of retirement income planning projections, like I said, we want to be simple. We want to simplify, simplify, simplify. And so we use simply 6% as a rate of return over the course of a client's retirement as an assumption in their plan. It's easy, it's linear, it's a conservative approach to retirement income planning, because generally every variable that we are plugging in, we want to round up or round down, whichever makes that variable more conservative. So with longevity, like I talked about last time, we round your we round your age of death up because that makes your planning more conservative. Well, we round your rate of return down because we know we can build you a portfolio, at least historically speaking, that can, and not guaranteed, obviously, but that can produce a rate of return equal to or greater than 6%. And so if we know we can do that, if we assume in our retirement income planning projections that you're earning 6% and you actually earn 7, 8, or whatever over a 20 to 30 year period, great. Those numbers look great. No problem. No issues. The issue would be if we assumed you making 8 or 9% over that same period and you ended up earning 7. Well, that math doesn't work. And that's what we're trying to avoid, is overly aggressive assumptions that don't play out in our favor for whatever reason. So 6% is the growth rate on investments in the stock market, in a stock and bond-based portfolio that we would be building for someone that we use in our planning software. Now, what about real estate? Real estate is got a couple different components. One would just be pure appreciation of the property, of the real estate, just like, we're assuming a stock appreciates. But two, for clients who have real estate rental income, commercial, residential, whatever, we have to make an assumption for the growth rate of that income. And so starting with the former, if you look at residential real estate, historically speaking, appreciates, depending on what you look at, somewhere around 3 to 5% per year, historically speaking. So simply put, if we have a primary residence, maybe an investment property, we are going to grow typically that asset at 3% per year for the life of the retirement plan. And while that's not always kicking off cash flow to the client, it still serves as part of their net worth that at the end of their plan, if they weren't to ever use that home equity, like sell the property and downsize or, reverse mortgage or something like that, that they could access their equity with, well, that's still equity at the end of their plan that is going to be going to their beneficiaries, their heirs. And sometimes that's important for clients to know, well, how much will be left over for my kids? Because I want to leave, my 3 kids X amount of money. Well, that doesn't have to be just from your investment accounts. If they inherit the house and it's worth whatever, well, that gets split 3 ways or whatever, however many ways, because it's got, X amount of equity. The note's paid off, the mortgage is paid off for sure in most cases by then. And, it's growing at 3% a year for 30 years. Well, it's going to more than double, just mathematically speaking. So that's how we would approach most real estate cases on an appreciation basis, unless there's some sort of specific, maybe commercial deal that a client is in that has, they feel strongly about a specific appreciation rate on some sort of real estate deal that they're in. Of course, we talk to the client about their specific situation. Now, on rental income, we would view that similar to just increasing your expenses in the plan at regular inflation rates, 2.5%, 3% per year. Because if you're the landlord, you're probably over time going to be increasing rents at roughly the rate of inflation over time. So we would model it in that way when it comes to someone who has investment properties or investment real estate where they're receiving recurring income from those properties over time. So all in all, when we look at your asset allocation, it's a super important assumption that we need to understand in your plan, in your portfolio. But when it comes to us running the numbers in the retirement income planning software, our approach is not to overcomplicate it and not to say, well, we think U.S. large cap growth is going to do this over the next 20 years, and U.S. small cap stocks are going to do this, and government bonds are going to do this, corporate bonds are going to do that. No, we don't think that that's the way to approach it. Let's just assume simply 6% per year. That's a conservative number. Historically speaking, we can get that number for clients, not guaranteed, obviously, over the long term. And everyone has an equal understanding of why we are doing that, because it's simple and it's conservative. So that is variable number 2 of the retirement income equation, and our unique way of approaching it in a way that we think makes sense, and just as important, our clients and the families that we serve understand. If you don't know what that is for you and what those assumptions look like plugged into your specific situation, we'd love to help you figure that out. We're pretty easy to find through this podcast, www.poterack.net. All our contact info is on there, and we'd love to get acquainted with you. Hope this was helpful, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. To ask questions about topics covered during the show, or get a copy of Making It Count, Life Isn't Lived on a Spreadsheet by Ryan Poterack, visit www.poterack.net or give us a call at 704-366-5776. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Poterack Capital Advisory. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Poterack Capital Advisory does not offer legal or tax advice. Please consult the appropriate professional regarding your individual circumstances. Nothing contained herein is to be considered a solicitation, research material, an investment recommendation, or advice of any kind. The information contained herein may contain information that is subject to change without notice. Any investments or strategies referenced herein do not take into account the investment objectives, financial situation, or particular needs of any specific person.
Product sustainability must be independently determined for each individual investor. Poterack Capital Advisory explicitly disclaims any responsibility for product suitability or suitability determinations related to individual investors.